welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. On today's show, we're focusing on registered retirement savings plans. While they are a primary source of retirement savings for most Canadians, there are many myths and misunderstandings surrounding RRSPs. So, are they the right investment product for you? And with the ongoing affordability challenges so many are facing, surveys show some are opting to invest less or not at all this year. And is that the right decision? With the RRSP deadline fast approaching, to help you make an informed decision, I want to welcome back to the show our investment expert, Wendy Brookhouse from Financial Planning Canada. She's a spokesperson there. She is a certified financial planner, money coach, and founder of Black Star Wealth. Wendy, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's so exciting to be here. I agree with the myth and misconception statement hugely.
Absolutely. We're going to get into a lot of really good information today, and I really appreciate you being here. Before we really get into it, can you share a little bit about yourself and your work with FP Canada?
Oh, I'd be happy to. So I started my financial services company almost 2 decades ago now. And along the way, I decided to get my certified financial planning designation. And that led me to FP Canada, which is kind of like the body that really does represent Canadians and wants to make sure that we have the right education as advisors and planners, and that we're providing really good service to Canadians. And so with Black Star, I've been helping people for, like I said, close to 2 decades, really understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then how can we make it as easy and simple as possible for them to achieve their goals.
So you do really great work, and that's obvious, and you're definitely the expert that we should be talking to today because it is RRSP season. The deadline to invest is typically the end of February. This year, we do have a few extra days. The deadline this year is Monday, March the 3rd. But before we sort of get into the discussion regarding the value of investing in an RRSP and who should be using them, I want to sort of start with some recent surveys that are showing that fewer Canadians are actually planning to contribute to their RRSPs this year, mainly because I think they're more concerned about meeting their sort of current financial needs, because it's hard to look to your future goals when you're sort of struggling to get by today. There is a survey from Edward Jones that shows less than half, so about 49%, say that they will add funds to their RRSP this year. Less than a quarter of those that are planning to invest say that they will max out their contribution. So not as many maxing out the contribution. 12% say they can't afford to contribute anything to their RRSPs. And the same percentages are saying that they're considering other investment options like tax-free savings accounts, non-registered accounts, and maybe even investing in real estate. So, Wendy, when you hear these sort of numbers for this year, is it concerning that more Canadians are maybe delaying this future investment?
It really is concerning because time is not our friend when it comes to this type of stuff. And thinking about the balancing off of our needs for today versus needs in the future, from a mental perspective, that can be so hard because tomorrow seems so far away. So how can we make it important today? And so I think it's super important to just automate it. You know, it's like pay yourself first because this is the paycheck that will pay you later, and figure out how can you make other shifts in your plans and your budgets and your spending maybe so that you can still achieve some of that money for the future.
Well, it's obvious that RRSPs are a very popular choice for Canadians to invest in, including many here in Ontario. It looks like 2/3 of Canadians use RRSP accounts in order to save for their retirement. Now, research shows that, of course, due to the last few years of economic uncertainty that we've been experiencing, balances in those accounts maybe aren't building as rapidly as they were a few years ago. Last year, 63% of Canadians reported that their current economic conditions were negatively affecting their ability to save for retirement. Are you hearing this same feedback when you're speaking with your clients?
Yeah, I think if we were to look at this into two different areas, it's around can I contribute and what's happening inside of those, and is this volatility causing you to hold back because you're worried that you may lose money or something like that? Because I think that plays into it as well. And I think back to 8 years ago, thinking, oh my gosh, the world's going to fall. This is a big change type of thing. And the natural inclination at that point might have been to go to cash or to reduce the risk. And then the stock markets took off on this run for, that's been very, very good for a long time. So there's that timing of the market that I don't think we can do. So it's like, how can we mitigate risk along the way? However, it's that, again, that mindset of how can I make sure that I'm planning for tomorrow while still having a good life today? So there's all kinds of things, like I think those both have to play into that. And it's very easy to put more emphasis on today because it's the thing we're dealing with right now. And when we look to the future, our future self, again, so far away, we think we can make it up.
And so it sounds like we don't really want to delay this, at least as much as we possibly can.
Yep.
And I think every little bit helps, even if it's just, a smaller contribution perhaps than what you were doing before. Now, I sort of want to get into the basics for our viewers because, like I mentioned at the top of the show, there's some misconceptions about what these products actually are. So can you start at the beginning and tell us what exactly is a registered retirement savings plan and how does it work?
Perfect. If we were to step back even further, Shannon, for a second, and we look at retirement planning, it really is about filling up different buckets, right? So if we're working and we're having a paycheck, we are contributing to the Canada Pension Plan. That's a bucket. Our old age security is a bucket. If we have a pension plan at work, it's a bucket. Our RSP is a bucket. Now, how it works and why I think that there's so much, I don't know why there's mystery, but there is, maybe just in how we've always just been told, put money into an RSP, put money into an RSP, but we're not necessarily told exactly how they work, right? So it is an instrument that the government put in place years ago to help people, encourage people to save for their retirement because they didn't think they were doing enough. So what they said is, you know what, if you were save for retirement now, we're going to make you pay less taxes based on what you contribute to that RRSP. So you save taxes today, and you know what, we're going to wait until you're like ready to retire or age 71. And we're going to then start making you pull some money out and taxing you as you pull it out of the RRSP. But what's great along the way is that it grows without being taxed. And that is significant in terms of when you are looking at what are the options and what are my buckets. Filling that bucket up first to defer taxes can oftentimes make a lot of sense.
So you just started to get into some of the benefits of having an RRSP account. You talked about the tax savings that we can take advantage of today. You also mentioned about the investment growth in that type of a plan. Are there other benefits to having an RRSP plan?
Well, again, it's mostly about the tax deferral, right? So if we think at our different stages in life, if we have a lot of, when we're raising a family and getting things going, there's a lot of demand for money and cash. Maybe we're paying down student loan debt. Maybe we're paying other debts off. So by contributing to an RSP, it's a method to actually increase our cash flow because we put money into the RSP and we get some of our tax money back. That can help in the long run with some of our other spending goals.
Right. Is there a limit to how much we can contribute to an RRSP?
There absolutely is. And right now it's 18% of your income up to a maximum of, I think it's at about 180,000. So the maximum contribution anyone can make on a year-by-year basis is 32,490. But what's also interesting is if this year you only put 20,000 in, that 12,000 of room is still there for you if you qualified. So it's every year that room continues to grow. And if you have a few years where you can't contribute, that room based on the amount of salary you have will continue to grow.
And you say 18% of earned income. Is that gross income or?
Yeah, gross.
That's gross income.
Number. It would include things like your commission income and anything else that would be going on to your T4 or kind of be reflected in line 150 of your tax return.
Are there any maybe negative things about investing in an RRSP?
Well, in my mind, with an RSP, you have to really kind of think of it as money that is way for the future, and you don't really want to, although you can tap into it if you absolutely needed to, it's kind of like you need to put it off to the side and say, I'll see you when I'm 65. Because if you do pull money out, so for example, if you made $75,000 a year and you pull $10,000 out of your RSP, the government is going to look at it as if you made $85,000 that year and tax you accordingly. Because what they're doing is if you take money out of the RSP, it is added into your income, and that's what they're going to tax you on.
And it seems like there is quite a bit of complexity maybe surrounding some of these types of plans. Can you sort of elaborate a little bit on that?
In terms of what can you put inside the bucket, do you think? Is that where we're going with that?
Yeah, and maybe sort of determining what type of investment options might be available.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Like if you're dealing with an investment advisor, every time you're going to do, what they're going to do is like a risk tolerance questionnaire. And that risk tolerance will talk about what is your appetite for risk. The most common question, I think that actually is a real big indicator, is if you were to temporarily lose money in the stock, the value of your investments, how much before you start freaking out? Right. And so what I think is a great exercise for people to do is actually kind of close their eyes and pretend I have $100,000. And then you go, if it's okay, now it's worth 95,000. Now it's worth 90,000. Now it's worth 85,000. When is this pit in your stomach going, no, no? And that kind of can help figure out your risk tolerance, right? Even if it's a temporary loss, it can still keep you up at night. So that's where you want to do. So you want to kind of match that for yourself along with the risk profile of a particular investment so that they match up. And then the other factor we look at is time frame. How long before you retire? Because that will affect things as well.
Now, we only have a couple minutes before we have to break, but we've seen some advertisements about encouraging people to borrow in order to invest into an RRSP. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it is very independent and important that everybody do the math. Okay. So if I make $60,000 a year and I put $5,000, I borrow $5,000 to invest in an RSP, my tax break on that is about $1,400. I still have to pay the $3,600 back on the loan if I take my tax return and put it on the loan. So you have to factor that into your day-to-day to see if you can still afford to do that.
So I think it's important to remember that an RRSP, it is an investment, and you can hold a variety of different types of investments within your plan. So the big question then becomes, how do you get the best return on your investment? And Wendy's going to have some really great advice for us when Money Matters returns after the break.
This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
This is a brain in urgent need of mental health care. But because 3 out of every 4 Indigenous people experience racism in healthcare, she may not get the help she needs. Become an ally. Rise above racism in healthcare.
You're watching an interesting local show on Rogers TV and you want to know more. That's when you head to rogerstv.com. Our website provides more information about our programs, our hosts, our schedule, and about how you too can get involved with Rogers TV. Visit us online at rogerstv.com.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Wendy Brookhouse, Financial Planning Canada Spokesperson, Certified Financial Planner, Money Coach, and founder of Black Star Wealth. And today we're talking about RRSPs because it is, after all, RRSP season. And the deadline to be able to contribute for this year is Monday, March the 3rd. And as we've discussed, an RRSP is an investment tool. It's a way to save your financial future. How well it performs depends on the investment options within your RRSP plan. So Wendy, that's what we're sort of going to get into now. Can you tell us what types of investments are more common in RRSPs?
Right. So first off, let's just be clear, none of this is advice for your situation and that there will be no investment advice given here for you. However, let's look at, I'd say overall, a lot of times what is chosen kind of depends on who you're working with. But I see a lot of money going into mutual funds, or now with the advent of ETFs or exchange traded funds, we're seeing a lot of money go into those. Why? Because they are kind of diversified investments that are a little easier because someone else is kind of like making all those investment choices about stocks and bonds and stuff, and you can just let it run depending on the risk tolerance of that particular fund.
Yeah, you mentioned before about the sort of risk that a person is maybe willing to take in these types of investments.
Yeah.
Are there certain investments that are in a safer category as opposed to the higher risk side?
Oh, absolutely. So let's break it down a little bit. In the investment universe, we kind of look at asset allocation, which is a fancy word for us to decide how much is going in cash, how much is going into fixed income, how much is going into stocks and bonds or equities, as we call them, and then maybe your more alternative type investments that are not in those three categories, okay? And inside each of one of those things, in cash, we know we can do high interest savings account. We can do different types of things that might give us more cash. Then we have our fixed income. Now, fixed income is where bonds and things of that nature show up. There's all kinds of different kinds of bonds. And it's essentially a bond is kind of like a loan agreement where we're going to loan some money to a company, a government, or some other place. We're going to get a rate of return on it, and because that's the rate on the bond, and that's how it works. So it's a little more safe. Of course, let me add some more complexity. Bonds can be categorized on the quality of the underlying loan, right? So they can be AAA all the way down to kind of, you've heard the junk bond type of things. So with junk bonds, there's more risk. You would expect a higher return. So that's the fixed income component. And then we have equities. And what's really interesting is I like to think about it a little bit like our house, right? If we own a house, we have equity in our house. If I own shares of Apple, that means I own part of Apple. And what Apple is doing is saying, okay, thank you for that. We may pay you some dividends. As the value of the company grows, the value of my shares grows. So that is kind of equities. It's like thinking I own part of a company. And so that's how those work.
Really good information. I really appreciate that. I think to add to your comment that this isn't sort of direct advice for our viewers, I think what should be exaggerated on is definitely turning to a financial professional when making these decisions. I think you would agree with that.
100%. And I know there's a lot of language out there about go it on your own, just do this, just do that. And for some people that works because they are naturally research oriented. They naturally want to know a lot of information, and maybe they have time to do that to make those decisions. Or you work with a professional who actually, that's their job. That's all they do all the time. So that's, I think, the difference we have there. When you work with a professional, of course, you have to pay for them. And that's where we get into the fees. And depending on what level of investment you're at and how many investments you have, that will all affect the fee level you're going to pay your advisor.
Right. Now, you also mentioned earlier that when it comes to investing in these retirement plans, time is your best ally.
Yes, it is.
Now, for our younger viewers, can you talk about the benefits of starting that investment early?
It's huge. And it comes down to if you want to save a big chunk of money, it's like chunking it down a little bit because there's this secret we hear about the compound power of growth, right? So if I invest $100 today and I earn 5%, well, now it's 105. And then it grows again. You earn another 5%. Oh, well, now it's worth more. So, and that just keeps going up and up. If you have time, you don't have to put as much in to get to the same end goal because of that power of compounding. If you wait from, say, when you're in 20s to your 40s, it means that the amount you're going to have to put in every month to get to that same goal is a lot bigger. So yeah, that's where this chunking it down, doing a little bit now and getting used to it can make a big difference in the future.
Now, for those who maybe are starting late, do you have any advice for them?
Absolutely. Every little bit you do is going to count. Every little bit is going to contribute. The money that you can put in now, allow it to grow. Even if it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, it's still going to be there for you to use as income in the future. Because let's be honest, that's what all these investments are for, is to fund retirement income when we're all done work. So we want to see how much we can get in there. And the more we can get in, the better we are. And so even if it's like, okay, I couldn't do as much because my kids were like money hungry, they cost me a lot of money, but now they're gone. You're an empty nester. Accelerate what you're putting in and keep going. So it is one of those situations where it's super easy to go, I'll get to that later. But the more you can just chunk off now. And, there's a lot of conversations around, if you just take a little bit off, you never notice. So a lot of times when I'm talking to my clients, I'm like, okay, you're living wonderfully now. We've got a plan. If you get a raise or some unexpected money, what if we increase your contributions by a third? So just taking 30% of that raise and putting it right into your savings, and you won't even miss it because you didn't have it before. You keep that going as part of a strategy, and all of a sudden you'd be surprised at how fast that money can grow.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And now there's also another avenue to this for couples that are earning a combined comfortable living, and they're looking to save for retirement. There's also a spousal RRSP. Can you talk a little bit about those and whether there's any advantages to them?
Yeah, I think what it can do is actually equal out retirement income, just in case. We know what the tax rules are now, but if they shifted at any point in your retirement, the more equal we can make you guys, like make a couple, the less we have to worry about that affecting us down the road. So here's how it works. When you put money inside a spousal RSP, so let's pretend it's me, and I make way more money than my husband, and I decide I want to use some of my RSP room, but put it into his name. Because that's what a spousal RSP is. I'm using my own RSP room to put money in for the other spouse. Okay? Now there are some rules too. You can't take that money out for 2 years, or whatever I put into that spousal RSP for my husband will be added back to my income, not my spouse's income, unless it's been there for over 2 years. So those are some of the rules you really, really want to be aware of, because it can be a huge tax deficit if not managed correctly. So I like it, one, for the balancing out of assets and just making sure things are going to be equal all the way through.
You mentioned earlier too about there is a limit to these RRSP investments. When we hit age 71, that's it. Unfortunately, the RRSP does have to be terminated. What are the options for the people that are 71 now or about to turn 71? What can they do with their RRSP?
There's a bunch of things they can do. Obviously, they could take it all out. I wouldn't advise that, because that can be a lot of taxes. But the most common thing we see happening is we're taking a registered retirement savings plan, and we're just shifting the name of it to a registered income fund. And we're doing that so that it's easier for the calculations and tracking of things, because now the government has said you've enjoyed tax-freeness long enough. It's time. It's time for you to start paying some taxes. Now, when it comes to your RSP and your RIF, there's two things that matter importantly. One is your age, and one is the value of those underlying investments kind of on December 31st of the year. Because what happens is the government has dictated, based on your age, this is the minimum percent you must pull out every year. And we're going to calculate that minimum based on what the value of your investments were on December 31st. And so that way, if you have to take 5% out and you have $100,000 on that day, you have to take $5,000 of income. You can choose to have it lump sum. You can choose to have it spread out and have it come every year. And I often encourage people to actually, in terms of having withholding tax on that, so that they don't have a tax bill at the end of the year, is just kind of understand all the income that's coming in and make sure that they're taxing themselves at the appropriate level.
That's some really good advice, because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are coming to that point where 71 is looming and they need to make some decisions. Now, just to shift gears just a little bit, we've already sort of delved pretty deep into RRSPs. Can we talk a little bit about tax-free savings accounts? Can you give us a little bit of information about those?
Absolutely. So it's such an interesting vehicle for saving for the future. So in my personal opinion, Shannon, they should not have been named a tax-free savings account. They should have been named tax-free investment account, because what I see a lot of times is people using only high interest savings in there, which hasn't been bad over the last couple of years, but before that, and we're moving again into lower interest rates, it's not paying a whole lot of money. And they're using it as, oh, this is my vacation fund, or this is I'm saving for a kid show reno fund. So they're really, for the amount of growth that's coming and the amount of tax they're saving is not a lot, versus this is for the future and I'm going to use it as an investment vehicle. Couple other things, and it's really, really important to calculate your limits on these types of things. How much can you contribute? And when it started back in 2009, we could put $5,000 a year. That is now up to $7,000 a year. And if you've never put in anything yet, and you've been in Canada and you've been the age of majority that entire time frame, you're now at $107,000. But if you're new to Canada and you've only been here 3 years, you only have 3 years of contribution room. If you turned 18 or 19 just a couple years ago, that's the amount of room you have. You don't have the whole thing. It's that calculation to be really aware of it. The other thing is, if you are pulling money out in any particular year from your tax-free savings account, there's this weird anomaly in the taxes, is that you can't put that money back till the next year. Or it triggers over contribution. So it's one of these, it's a weird rule, but that's how they've set it up so they can handle it. So that's some things to keep in mind with your tax-free savings account. I love it, because what it does is it gives us tax-free income in retirement, right? So if we have an RSP, it's fully taxable. CPP is fully taxable. OAS is fully taxable. Here's our pot of tax-free money that won't trigger us going over new limits and paying more tax.
Right. So there's lots of different options available, and I really appreciate all of the information that you've been able to give us today. Thank you so much. For any of our viewers that want to reach out for advice, how can they do that? How can they contact you?
Oh, very good. So my website is blackstarwealth.com. They can email me, Wendy or go over and check me out on LinkedIn. Lots and lots of posts there that I try to educate people on different things.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much again for being here today and sharing your advice for everyone. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
This is a man's heart, a heart in desperate need of medical attention. But because 78% of Indigenous people experience racism in healthcare, he may not get the help he needs. Become an ally